Hello, and welcome to the SMB Playbook for building high-impact teams. I'm Sasha Robinson, the head of people operations at Trainual, and I've spent my career building high-impact teams at VC-backed startups. I predominantly join businesses when they're early stage after their first round of funding, around 15 employees, and help them scale through 100 or 150 employees. And there have been years where I've had to add 30 new people to a team all by myself. And that's forced me to create efficiencies in my process so we hire the right people. And I want to share that with you today. A couple of the things that we're going to cover. First, how to put in the work up front for hiring, interviewing, and onboarding to remove headache down the line. Another, how to find the best people for the roles that you need for your business right now. And the last, how to document and delegate pieces of your hiring process so you can scale efficiently. For those of you who are not familiar with Trainual, we are the playbook software for growing your business. It's a one-stop shop to document all of your policies, procedures, and best practices. And it's online, so your employees can access it anywhere. So you can onboard new employees and make sure all of your existing employees are up to date on all of the changes that are happening in your business. Pre-Trainual, way before I was super good at my job, I was in a role where I was tasked with hiring 25 new unique roles in 1 year, all by my lonesome. And this is working with 8 different departments, and a lot of them were urgent, like hired yesterday would be the preference. And it's really daunting to try to fill those roles and manage a great candidate experience and make sure everyone feels really good working with the business, to make sure that your interview team is trained up and they actually know how to hire someone and match a role against a person's past experience. And then to make sure that the role that you're hiring for is actually the role the business needs to be successful and to solve the problems that it's facing. And I will be the first to admit that when I'm that busy, some of those things dropped, if not all of those things. And there were times where a candidate was maybe 75% of the way there, and we pulled the trigger and we hired them. And in the short term, I was super relieved. I had filled a rec and I felt like I had done my job. But then months into that new hire onboarding into the team, it was very apparent that A, they didn't love the role and they weren't the right skills fit. And we actually struggled with their performance and they eventually left the company. And so in the long term, it was financially and emotionally, culturally exhausting to have to fix this mistake that I had made because I didn't invest the time up front to make sure I had the right hiring practice, to make sure we were hiring for the right role and we fit the right person into that role. And so I want to talk about the process that we use at Trainual to make sure all of the roles that we're hiring for are the roles that we need. The interview team is prepped and trained and ready to properly evaluate all of the candidates that they're interviewing against the job description or the scorecard that you built. And then make sure you find the perfect candidate that'll be so happy in this role and productive and want to be with the company long term. Okay. So before we dive into the specifics of our process on everything you need to do before posting your job description to make sure you're hiring for the right role and you are interviewing the right people to be successful long-term, I want to talk about some of the criteria for all candidates that are interviewing for all roles in your business. And I think this is really important. So here at Trainual, we care if people care about us, about our mission, our vision, and our values, or something else related to our business or the customers we serve. And so I would urge you to sit back, think about what you do, who you serve, and why people might care about joining your organization. So for example, for Trainual, we are an early stage, VC-backed, high-growth SaaS company. We build Playbook software that serves the SMB customer, and we are building our company in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we have an incredible culture, like the best. And whenever we have someone interview for a role, doesn't matter what role, executive, support rep, intern, we want them to care about some piece of that. We have people on staff that have built their own small businesses, and they grew up working at their parents' small business, and they care deeply for the customers that we serve. There's other people like me that are early stage junkies that love building teams from very small through hundreds of employees. And so you need people that really deeply care about some aspect of what you're doing or your stage of growth or what you're trying to build. So when times get tough, like when a pandemic hits, where everyone can come together and grow and build something incredible. So before you hire any role, make sure to think about that and think of that as you're interviewing everyone. Why do they care about you? And make sure they're not just applying for a job, but they're applying for an incredible role and opportunity with a growing incredible organization. So I have no data to back up this claim, but I am almost positive that about half the time when an employee leaves an organization, it's because of a role mismatch. And that role mismatch is usually because you didn't put in the time up front to think through what you should actually be hiring for. And as I was sitting in my house the other day, feeling really hot in an Arizona September day, I was thinking about if I was hot and I was trying to fix the problem, I would probably look at my thermostat like, it's not working. I need to call the AC guy. But if I had just turned around, I would have seen this huge hole in my wall and realized I don't need an AC guy. I need the repairman for the drywall. And that's kind of how I think about planning for your organization. You might think that there's a problem over there, and on the surface, that's the problem that you need to solve. But if you dig a little deeper or you work with other teams and you really try to figure out what's going on, it's actually something different. And that's the role that you should be hiring for and the profile person that needs to solve that problem. So in order to make sure that you're hiring the drywall person and not the AC person, you have to stay on top of some of these organizational problems and changes. And the way we do that at Trainual is a couple of different steps. First, I meet with all of our people leaders every week. I check in on how they're doing, how their teams are doing, what challenges they're facing, what roadblocks they have, and we talk about potential headcount that we'll need. And then we meet more formally once a month with our director of finance, and we deep dive into why they want certain headcount and what problems they will solve. And when we meet with every single leader of every department in a day-long extravaganza of ops meetings, it's really clear what problems that we're facing across the organization and what types of roles would be solving multiple problems, or we could consolidate. And so we get creative in thinking through what people will need for certain roles and how that can all fit together. It's kind of like a puzzle. And so once we have all of this information, we'll sit down with the hiring manager and we'll ask them a lot of questions. So they'll say, hey, we want to hire a customer success manager to do XYZ. My first question, why? What are they going to do? What value are they bringing? How can they help the organization? And ideally, they'll be able to paint a clear picture of the ROI for this role. And usually it falls into two buckets. The first is it's solving a bandwidth issue. So let's say we have a support team. They handle inbound tickets and emails and calls for all of our active customers and potential customers. And they're slammed 40 to 50 hours a week and they're overwhelmed. They might need another person on their team to help them free up time for them to work on projects to create efficiencies or create a better experience for our customers. So that's a bandwidth type of hire. Happens a lot in repeatable roles where you're solving the same problem, either in different territories for different groups of people, and it can happen all over the organization. The other type of hire is a skill set that you do not have on the existing team. And I'll find a couple of examples. So first would be on our customer success team. We wanted to bring on someone who had experience helping and consulting with SMBs and building out their SOPs, their procedures. So when we had clients come on that wanted desperately to document their business, but didn't necessarily know how, we had someone on staff that could help them. We looked at our team at the time and we didn't have anyone that had built their own company or worked with small businesses in the past. So we went out and acquired a new skill set to help us build a new function in the business and our services department and customer success. Okay, so once you decide, hey, I need to hire someone, and you really figure out what problem you're trying to solve in your organization, and you sit down with your hiring manager and you figure out whether it's a new skill set that you're bringing onto the team or it's just freeing up bandwidth of existing team members, potentially adding someone who can manage people, whatever that looks like, sit down and dive deep, figure out what they'll be doing and start taking tons of notes. And just talk through everything, ask a bunch of questions, and then from all of those notes that you take, you can start building a job description. And we use kind of a different template for building our job descriptions. We call them impact descriptions. And I stole this from a podcast that I heard from someone on the Lever talent team. And I was so impressed with the way they thought about hiring and retaining talent. We have our impact or job descriptions built out into a couple of categories, and I'll go through each one with you. So the first is a TLDR section, too long, didn't read. Here's an example. This is for our social media manager hire that we hired a couple of months ago. As you can see, it's very specific and targeted towards a type of profile that loves social media and content creation and is basically on their phone constantly. And it was super important that we targeted a very specific profile. We don't want a ton of applicants that are kind of a fit for the role. We want a few incredible fits so we can find the right person. And so if the candidate saw nothing else, if they just read this 1 or 2 second blurb, they would understand that they are a perfect fit for this role. But because most people should and do read on, we have a couple more sections. The next is what you will own and improve. We usually just do 3 bullets here. We try to keep it short and sweet. These are the 3 key areas that they will own in their role, things that are important to their success and helping move the business forward. The next is things that you already know. This can either be a skill set, different experiences, and they can pull from past things that they've done. And then the last is what they will learn. And for us, this is almost the most important section because we're big believers in growth planning for our employees. If they're investing and taking the time to help us build our business, we want to reinvest in them too and help them in their career path. And then the last section is how success is measured. And this is important so they know how their specific actions are going to translate into measurable business results and how their role funnels up to the larger KPIs for the business as a whole. So once you have your impact description, it's important to build something that we call a job scorecard. You can call it whatever you want in your organization, but it's basically a snapshot of the role and expectations for the new hire coming in. It's a little bit more in depth than what they'll see online on the impact description or your job description. So for us, this includes their start date, who they report to, they have any direct reports, there's a 1-sentence purpose, why we hired this role, what problem they're solving. We have 3 focus areas. So for one of my direct reports, her 3 focus areas are benefits, diversity, inclusion, and equity, and onboarding, and facilitating an incredible employee experience. There are all 3 of those areas. So she knows when she comes into work, she's focusing on one of those areas more likely than not. And then we have a section for key responsibilities, which is anywhere from 3 to 10 core activities that are repeatable within their role. We have metrics and how we measure success, what the baseline is, what our growth goal is, and then we have what does the next step look like for you? And so we've built out either steps to get there, what those next roles look like within that department or into other departments. We're big on lateral mobility and making sure people are really happy in the roles they're in. Once we have our impact description in a rough draft form, we send it to the interview squad. Who is the interview squad, you might ask? Well, the hiring manager and I will sit and discuss who we want to interview this person or these candidates and why. And typically, the way that we structure our interview process is the first interview with people operations, where we're checking for role alignment and values and vision alignment. The next interview is with the hiring manager, where they go deep on past experiences and try to use behavioral interviewing to see how their past experience can translate into future performance at Trainual. But then there are all sorts of other pieces of the role that we may not have gotten to yet in those 2 interviews. And that's where we pull in peers and other folks on the leadership team to do cross-functional interviews. But I'm not sure how many of you have been in a cross-functional interview where you go in blind and you end up asking all the same questions and you don't really know how to evaluate. That's what we try to avoid. We set up an interview guide. We all write down our questions ahead of time to make sure that we're not asking the same things and we're all looking to dig into specific focus areas based on the role description that we've already created. Once everyone has created all of their questions, then we load them into our applicant tracking system, Lever, and we build feedback forms. So after everyone completes their interview, they can put all of their feedback in there for the specific focus areas that they're targeting when talking to candidates. So after they submit feedback, it's really easy to see how this candidate is performing against the rubric that we've created for the role. But before a hiring manager or anyone on the interview squad even gets on the phone with a candidate, we put them through the hiring and interviewing training that we built in our internal Trainual account. Because it's really important that whoever we're putting in front of a candidate knows how to interview, knows how to dig deeper and understand what the candidate is saying, and make sure that they're not falling prey to their biases and things that they like or dislike immediately about a candidate. And so they're going through training. 0 time for me because it's built and I've signed it. They're building out their questions, the feedback forms are built, and there's all this automation suddenly infused into our hiring process where I can interview someone, move them to the next step. I already have all of the interview guides prepared. The team knows what to expect. We get everything scheduled and we can move really quickly. The last role we hired for, we spent about a week and a half prepping, talking to the interview team, going through training, building out our interview guides, building out our feedback forms, even email automation. And once we posted the job, we opened and closed the rec in 10 days because everyone knew what to do and it was so easy to align expectations for what this role was and what candidates would be doing. So we've just outlined the preparation that goes into planning for a new hire, from the org planning and problem solving, figuring out what you actually need to hire, to building out the process, who's hiring, what questions they're asking, how they'll evaluate success of a candidate in an interview against the rubric or the role that you've developed. But what questions should you actually be asking? And as people professionals listening, I'll provide a little bit of insight into what I ask in my interview and why I ask the questions that I do. And on the surface, they may seem very basic, and in a way, they are. But I'm not trying to trick a candidate. I genuinely want to try to get to know them and why they like what they do, why they care about Trainual. So let's talk about some of the specific questions I ask. To start, I always ask, why are you looking? And in a pandemic, there's a ton of layoffs going on. So maybe they got laid off. Maybe they're looking for a growth opportunity, or they love your business so much they would never leave their role if it wasn't for your business hiring for this specific role. So figure out why they're looking. Are they running from something, or are they super excited about an opportunity and running towards something? That's an important distinction for me to figure out what type of employee they are and what's important to them. So after you ask that, I typically go into why Trainual, or why your business? What about us attracted you to apply? And you get a range of answers from, hey, I've been following your YouTube videos and the culture seems amazing, to, hey, I didn't know there was another incredible early stage SaaS company, to, hey, I love small businesses. I actually used your product, loved it, and would love to join the team. And it's cool to see how they found out about you, why they engaged, and why they want to join. And then I dive into their background. So I ask, tell me your story, and you can start wherever you think is relevant, whether that's when you were 5, 15, 25, I don't care. I just want to know who you are, why you do what you do, and take me through your educational and professional journey. And a lot of times people will start when they're in high school and when they started thinking about what was important to them, where they wanted to go to school, what they wanted to be when they grew up. And it really helps inform what they're passionate about, why they made certain career pivots. So after you hear their story, I like to hear about what their favorite role was of all time. What were their favorite aspects of that role? What was their least favorite role? Least favorite aspects of what they've done? What they're really good at? What they're not so good at? What they never want to do again? And then what would their boss say is the thing that they are better at than just about anyone else in the world? And this will start to give you a clear picture of what they enjoy doing based on their favorites, what they're really good at, what other people in positions of authority think that they're good at. And then you can start talking about the future. And I know not everyone has an answer to what do you want to be in 5 years, or what do you want to be when you grow up? But just talk through what's important to them. Do they want to be managing a team? Do you potentially want to move into a different department? There's so many people that want to try out different things, but they're afraid to really talk about it. So emphasize how you're focused on growth and you care about them as a person and their career journey. It's super, super important that you care. Again, they're spending time helping you build something. Invest in them too. And so once you have this clear picture, and you've heard all of that from them first, that's very important, let them talk first, then tell them all about the role. And make sure that there's alignment between what you are expecting this person to do, what this role is right now, and what the future state of this role could be, what their growth path looks like. And help talk through that, make it a conversation. And so that's why I spend 60 minutes with candidates when they come in for their first interview, which is kind of long for a first interview. But I find that it's really helpful in getting to know them, hearing their story, what they love, what they don't love. And you'd be surprised when you actually take the time to talk to someone and ask what they never want to do again. Oftentimes, they'll tell you exactly what the role that you are posting is doing. And so, you never want to answer a support ticket again, yet you're applying for our support role. And if you talk it out, they'll usually backtrack. I'm like, oh no, just kidding. I definitely want to do this. But you know, in their heart of hearts, they definitely do not want to be doing this. And so they'd either be unhappy in the role, or they'd be looking for a way out of that role or a way up into a new position. And that may not be what your organization needs right now. You need a great fit for this role, not a great fit for your organization, not a great fit a year from now. You need the right fit right now. Through this people operations or this first interview you have with the candidate, you get to hear their story, their likes, their dislikes, and then it's the job of the other interviewers on the interviewing squad, as I like to call it, that dig into specific role skills or specific behaviors or traits. And then you take all of the data that you've accumulated throughout this entire process. For us, it's usually 3 to 5 interviews. And then when you reference check and you're asking Their references, what they're really good at, what types of roles they would hire them for, what their superpower is. You reference it against everything they're saying. Are there consistencies or inconsistencies? What are they saying they're great at? What types of roles would they hire them for? And that's very telling for the type of people that we want to join our organization. In addition to all of our interviews, and now I'm starting to feel like our interview process is a nightmare, but I promise you it's fun. After all of these interviews, we typically do some sort of project or demonstration of your actual skill set, because there are some people that are really, really great at interviewing and not so great at their actual job. And so we use this opportunity to figure out what they're really good at and if they can put their money where their mouth is. So for our product team, for example, our director of product has built this really interesting project, where he asked candidates to compare 2 different potential markets for us to move into: the learning management system, which is moving up market, or the all-in-one workspace, which is moving down market. It's a question that we considered for a while, about a year ago. We never really found an answer. So we didn't have a right answer. We didn't know what we wanted to do, but he wanted to see how they thought about it, what assumptions they made, and how they framed their decision. And so I would say it's a 50-50 split on the answers that the candidates sent. And it didn't really matter, again, what the answer was, but where they got their data, how they explained their rationale, what product changes they would make because of it. And then they presented that information to the hiring manager. And that was a huge deal breaker for some candidates that we loved up to that point, because they weren't able to make a clear assumption, or they didn't make a clear rationalization for their choices. And that's concerning for joining a fast-paced, early-stage company where you need to be able to make decisions on the fly based on somewhat limited data. And there are other people, maybe the underdog, that were like, 3rd place going into the demo, and suddenly we were blown away by what they were actually able to produce. And so we think it's really important to have this type of demo or project, and we do it for all roles. In sales, it's a live demo of our product. In product or design, it's some sort of project that reflects what they'd actually be doing in the role. For people, it's a mock interview. But for all of these things, it's a 2-way street. It's us getting to see their skill set, but it's also giving them exposure into what the role actually is. We want them to experience what a day in the life for a project that would be relevant to what they would be doing is, so they have very clear expectations going into the role. There's nothing worse than over-promising and under-delivering on a role once a candidate signs the offer letter and starts onboarding. So we have hiring training for our hiring managers and the interview team to make sure they're prepared going into interviews with candidates. But what about preparing our interviewees? I know that might seem counterintuitive, but it's actually helpful in setting them up for success so they know what to expect. So we also created a training subject for any interviewees that get past the first interview with the people team. And it has 2 topics. The first is all about Trainual. So it's our mission, vision, values, and some statements from Chris, our CEO. There's a clear explanation of our growth history and where we're going moving forward, why we're hiring, and why we desperately need them to join the team. We deep dive into all of our benefits and some of the logistics to make sure it's a fit for them and their family. And then our second subject is all about them. We ask them to either record a Loom or write a summary if they don't like being on camera, and tell us more about them, tell their story, why they care about Trainual, how they found us, and why this role. Why do they care about joining Trainual in this capacity? And we share that with the interviewing team, 1, for efficiency's sake, so we save time, but 2, to make sure that everyone on the interviewing team deeply understands why this candidate has connected with our brand and this role and how this aligns with their career path. Plus, what's cooler than getting an inside look into the product of the company you're interviewing at? Super cool, right? I know it may seem like a lot. All of this time you have to invest talking to your leaders, building processes, training your interview team, but I promise you that it's worth it long term. If you choose to forego all of this process and just try hiring, in the short term, you might fill roles faster, you might get people in the seats faster, but it's very unlikely that you're going to get the right people to solve the problems that you need solved to grow your business. And so long term, you'll get a better ROI, more productive, and happier employees. And if you weren't listening to anything else I said, let's cover the 3 most important things. First, figure out what role you actually need to hire for. Remember the AC person versus the drywall person? Dig a little deeper before you hear one thing about a problem and just try to hire to solve that symptom. There might be something bigger going on. 2, Spend the time up front to develop processes and training and guides, email automation, anything you can to make your process as simple as possible once you post your job. And number 3, automate the aforementioned processes. It's way easier to hire and scale your business when all of the processes that you've spent time developing are automated through software or different tools that you're using. So for example, for hiring training or for working with your candidates to prepare them, use a tool like Trainual so you can train them and everyone's on the same page about expectations. And yeah, it might seem like I'm a little biased because I work there, but I'm telling you because it works and it's incredible at aligning expectations and making sure everyone at the organization and maybe future employees are all aligned around what you're trying to do and build. All right, if you're all fired up, ready to go create some really cool processes for your interviewing, hiring, and onboarding practices and processes, then great. Look no further. I've already done a lot of the legwork for you. If you look below, there's some PDFs you can download, include templates for job scorecards, impact descriptions, interview guides, even hiring and onboarding checklists. If you have any additional questions, I'm happy to chat with you here in the chat window, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat offline. Thank you again for joining me today.